Hey gang, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to show you something that I think is pretty cool if you're in the DIY type market, or if you have a bunch of old batteries laying around that you don't know what to do with. So honestly guys, I love messing with batteries, I love messing with power stations, and I like kind of building my own battery boxes, and I used to do a lot of it. I don't do that as much anymore, but I've been seeing these DIY battery boxes on YouTube and on Amazon quite a bit lately, so I wanted to test out this licitti X box, and it's pretty cool, and it comes in at $158. So if you've got an old car battery that's still good, or several other lithium iron phosphate tap batteries, or just other car batteries in general that you don't know what to do with, you can turn those into a DIY little portable battery station. So all this thing is, it's a giant battery box, but in the top of the lid is where all the goods are at, and I'll pull it open, and you can see here, it is a 1000 watt inverter, pure sine inverter. You've got 3 USB outputs, and I'll give you a close-up of this. You've got a main power switch to turn on and off your battery. You've got an LCD display screen. You've got a ton of 50 amp and 175 amp Anderson input and outputs. You've got one 110 volt AC receptacle, and if you look closely, it basically just looks like a very advanced type DIY box, which is cool because if any of these components somehow, you know, break or whatever, they're very easy to replace. You can get these off the shelf. It's just very user friendly, unlike some regular power stations where they're really hard to take apart or to fix if you have to. But this is the brains of the operation. Well, here's what you get with if you get this unit. It comes with a little pack of some goodies, and it comes with a strap and a couple of tie down points that you can use to say anchor on a piece of plywood or on a bench or whatever. So you'll anchor these down and you'll use the strap to go over the lid, and you can, you know, tighten it down to you know, the bottom of a cabinet or whatever you want to mount this thing to. It's not going to move around. So it comes with a strap and a couple of mounting brackets for you. Comes with some rubber boots to protect the battery terminals inside, and some screws to actually screw on the lid to the battery box. Now it also comes with a 50 amp Anderson connector to some alligator clips that you can use to actually charge up another battery if you want, and a 50 amp Anderson to MC4 connectors. So this thing does have a 10 amp MPPT controller here underneath these wires right here. Now I will say this is kind of the only downside that I see to this box, and I'll kind of go over it a little more in detail when I show you the testing of it, but it's only 10 amps, and I don't know what the charging parameters of this MPPT charge controller is, because this battery you can use with lead acid, flooded, AGM, LiPo4, any battery basically that will fit in this box you can use it for, and all of those different batteries have different charging parameters. So I don't know, and licitti couldn't really tell me what the charging parameters were of this MPPT, but it is rated at 10 amps. I don't know if it gets all the way up to 14.6 volts, which is where it needs to be to charge a LiPo4 battery, or if it only maintains around, you know, the lower lead acid charging parameters. I don't know, and licitti couldn't tell me. But anyway, you can charge it via solar, via a dedicated Anderson output. Inside this box, it actually has a strap that you can use to, once you put the battery in, to kind of cinch it down. And let me show you how that works. So I'm just going to use a standard, I say standard, but just a 100 amp hour, this is a time USB battery, but it just slides right in, and you can use these straps here to really cinch it down pretty tight, and this battery's not going to move anywhere, okay? Now this actual battery box is rated for, again, you can use pretty much any battery that you have, but it's rated in terms of lead acid batteries, 70 amp hours all the way up to 130 amp hours. Or for a lithium iron phosphate battery, this unit is rated for 70 amp hours up to 200 amp hours. So a huge broad range of batteries that you can put in this thing if it fits. Now the internal dimensions of this box here, 13.1 inches long, 7.8 inches wide, and 9.4 inches tall. So if you have a battery that is within those specifications, it'll fit into this box. And let me just put the lid back on, and I'll show you how I kind of routed these wires, but it's very simple. but this is it. This is how big it is. And it's just I don't know. I think it's fun. I think it gives a benefit if you have a lot of batteries laying around. But enough of the chit chat. Let me take you over to the bench and show you the inverter and some of the USB ports and how it pans out. All right, so let's check out the inverter and test out some of these USB ports that are on the lid of this device, because again, the lid is where everything is held. This bottom box is simply just for the battery. So I've got the battery installed. We're gonna turn this unit on with the main switch. We're gonna cut it on. And one of the things about this display is you can see there's a mode button up here. So you can press and hold it for about 5 or 6 seconds, and it's gonna go into what is called mode 2. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna cycle through all of the voltage, the output voltage, the battery voltage, and the watts being used by the inverter. And if you don't like the rotating displayed screen for mode 2, just simply press and get it out of it. Now you can select if you want to display the AC voltage, the inverter voltage, or the watt output, just by clicking it and toggling through whatever you want it to stay at. So for this demonstration, I'm gonna keep it on watts because we're gonna test out the inverter. But we're gonna kind of start off slow with this guy. I say slow, but here's a 500 watt halogen light that we're gonna put way over here. I do have a watt meter that I'll turn around and show you folks, but we're just gonna get this thing started. And obviously the light is on. This is showing around 426 watts. And look at this. 424 watts, almost 425 watts. 425 watts. So, this display so far for the watt output is actually very accurate. Now you can toggle through and we can look at the voltage. So the battery's at 12.8. The output voltage for the inverter is sitting at 110.8. So this is a 110 volt rated inverter, pure sine inverter, but it's outputting 110 watts. So 422 watts again, and that's really close, 423 watts. So let me unplug this halogen light, and let's push this thing a little bit. But it's only got one AC receptacle. So to do some of this testing, I'm gonna plug in a little splitter here, and we're gonna check out the sine wave. So 110 volts, 109.8. We'll go to the sine wave. And it's a pretty good sine wave. There's a little bit of dirtiness in there, but overall, still a pretty clean sine wave for a unit of this price point. So this voltage here is showing 109.5. This is showing 110.4. So we're about 1 volt off right now, at least according to this meter and the display. Let's go back to watts because we know this is pretty accurate. 420 watts. I'm going to plug in a little 250 watt heater because apparently I love punishment in this 100-degree garage. Turn this heater on. And we're climbing up to 650, 670. 700 watts, 687 watts. Let's check out the voltage. Battery's at 12.5. This is a pretty low. I do need to charge this battery up that's in here. Sitting at 111.8 volts, which is interesting because actually the more load I put on this thing, the higher the voltage is. Let's double check that to make sure that I'm seeing that right. Hey, look at that. 111.2 volts. So the more output that this inverter uses, the actual higher the voltage is. Because we were only sitting at 110 volts running that 500 watt halogen light. Now we're at 111.2. Interesting. Okay, so we're sitting pretty comfortably at 621 watts. Now, I do have the fans running on this thing, and you can probably not hear it. I do have a small fan behind me, but these fans are actually pretty quiet. Here's my mic. So I do have power stations that are louder than this. You've got your intake fan on the back and you've got your outtake fan on the side. So it's pulling in air, pushing it over all the components in the lid and spitting it out the side. Let's see if we can get this thing to actually trip itself. So now I've got a 1500 watt space heater that this should not last very long. 450, 560, 600, 700. I do have this on the low setting right now. So we're at 750 watts. Let me crank up the heat a little bit. Okay, so it looks like that's going to be the max output for this heater on the low setting. Let me crank it up to high. Yeah, it just shut off. It's beeping at me. 1200 watts, 1220 watts. It's still going. 1242 watts. We're still going. There we go. So that ran over 1,000 watts for about, I would say, 8 to 10 seconds. So it's not one of those instantaneous cutoffs. So if you do have a load that needs to go over 1,000 watts for longer than a split second, it looks like this would do it. Let me cut this off and let's try that one more time. Okay. $1,180 watts, 1157, 52, 1146 watts, and there it cut off. So the surge rating on this thing actually lets this device run for, again, longer than a split second that some of these power stations that I have do. Because if you get anywhere over that continuous rated wattage and you try to get to that surge wattage, it only lasts for a millisecond. This actually seemed to keep this thing running for at least, I would say, between 3 to 8 seconds, which is pretty good. Let's test out some of these DC ports. So I'm going to cut the inverter off, and one of the downsides of this box is the display doesn't have anything to do with the DC outputs, okay? So you're not going to be able to monitor the watts that you're pulling out of your battery from these DC ports, but these are independently switched, so you can cut on and off this power delivery and quick charge port with just a little button on both of these. But let's go ahead and test out. I've got a little battery here. There's no real direction on how powerful these power delivery type C ports are. So let's cut it on. Let's plug it into that and see how many watts we're going to input into this power station. So I can see the battery is charging. And we're going to slowly climb up to 20 watts. So this looks like it is a power delivery 20 watt output port. Obviously output only, no input. Let's check this one. So let me cut this supply on, plug it into here. That's reset to 0. We gonna work? Okay, we're going up. And it looks like we've maxed out at 20 watts. So these appear to be two 20 watt output power delivery type C ports. Get that unplugged. And what else we got over here? Okay, so I got my iPad and my phone. So let's use one of the power delivery ports to see if it'll start charging this iPad. And it's hard to get these things on camera, but my battery's just green. I mean, my battery is white, so it's not charging. Just plugged it in. Now I am charging. But again, so it's got the green with the lightning bolt up on the top. So this is charging. Let's try my phone with the quick charge port on this side. Let's switch up. There we go. So we are charging. Now again, the only downside to this type of DIY type kit is I don't know how many watts these devices are actually charging, because this screen is only for the inverter or the AC side of the battery. So that's the downside of it. But There's ways that you can figure this out. I'm just not going to go into it right now because it is charging. I know that that power delivery output's 20 watts. So yeah, the power delivery and the USB-C ports do work. And I'll kind of take you on a tour around this thing. So again, your main battery cutoff switch. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And here on the side is going to be all of your 50 amp Anderson inputs, with the exception of this one 175 watt Anderson input. And you can use this 175 amp input output Anderson connection to actually jump off your vehicle. So you will have to purchase separately a 175 amp Anderson connector and some battery clips if you want to turn this into an emergency jump starter type device. But you can use that because it's up to 175 amps. Then you've got 1, 2, 3 standard 50 amp Anderson input or outputs. That can be used to, again, of course, output up to 50 amps worth of DC power, or input DC 50 amps via an AC wall charger or whatever you want. It does have one black Anderson 50 amp. This is for the MPPT solar charging. Now, I don't like the way that they do the MPPT on this thing because I don't know what the charging parameters are on the MPPT, and I contacted Licitti and they couldn't really give me a good answer. However, Licitti did contact me via my email when I asked them what the charging parameters were for the MPPT, and they recommended a solar panel up to 150 watts, no more than 20 volts. So keep that as a little grain of salt. I would only use this as like a trickle charger. So plug in a very small 75, 100 watt solar panel and use this input to actually top off the batteries. You can get another 50 amp Anderson connector and plug it into any one of these input-output gray Anderson connections and use that as solar charging if you want. So you would have to probably modify your solar panels and put an Anderson connector on it, or add some MC4 connectors and run it to the Anderson input, plug that into that, and use your own MPPT controller, like, I don't know, like this one. Have this out to the side, or mount it to the top, or whatever you want. But you can actually use your own MPPT controller and plug it into any one of these gray 50 amp input output Anderson connections. So I can actually get, I think this is a 40 amp MPPT controller. I can use this tied in to one of these, and I can also use the supplied MPPT inside to run a very small solar panel. So you can do multiple inputs at one time. But if I was really going to use this and wanted to input a lot of solar, I would use my own MPPT and plug it into one of these. That's just my opinion, what I think's best. And the other good thing about this battery pack that I've seen compared to some of the other ones is they actually recessed all of these Anderson connections. I've seen some battery boxes like this where they're screwed or glued on top, and then they have the wires running down into the lid of the box. So they're kind of exposed, and they might be a little bit easier to knock or break free. I do like that these are recessed in this little portion of the lid right here. And then of course, again, you got your outtake fan, your AC receptacle, and then your intake fan. And that's it. It's just a box. So open this up and kind of show you how I have the wires. So I kind of stuck the negative wire in between the battery and the box on this side, and the positive line between the battery and the battery box on the opposite side, and the lid just fits down in it just fine. And of course, it comes with bolts where you can attach the lid on all four corners. I didn't do that because I wanted to show you folks, but I don't know, guys. I think it's just a pretty sweet little DIY option. I think it's pretty neat, and for the price point, 158 bucks. I don't know, I just think it's pretty cool. So let's go back to the bench and do some final thoughts. Okay, so there you have it. I gotta say, I'm a little bit impressed with the inverter capabilities of this unit. I don't know the longevity of the inverter, but again, this thing is $158. So take that with a grain of salt on the actual quality of the components, but the fans aren't loud. The voltage was 110 volts, which I would rather be 120, but again, it's 158 bucks. And the voltage actually rises with more draw being used off of the inverter, which is a little bit different than what I've seen in a good way. But one thing I didn't really talk about is, like, if you want to use this MPPT built-in Anderson input, it does come with this 50 amp Anderson to MC4 connectors. And all you do is take what's supplied and you plug it in right here. So there you go. Then you're going to use these MC4 connectors and plug them into your solar panel. Now I'm going to do another video, a separate video, where I show you how I'm going to use a separate MPPT controller that I can actually change the charging parameters, and I'm going to use one of these extra 50 amp inputs, and I'm going to use my own MPPT. I think that's going to be the best option. This is good if, again, if you want to just hook up a light, small solar panel and just kind of use it as a trickle charger, but it does come with what you need. Now, if you want to charge this via AC unit, you do have to kind of do your own thing. So what I did was, I have this fairly inexpensive multi-battery charger that can charge AGM, flooded, lead acid, LiPo 4, and it came with alligator clamps like most chargers do. So what I had to do was, I cut off the clamps and I installed this 50 amp Anderson plug. So you've got to plug your AC to DC charger into your wall like you would a normal battery, and then use this Anderson connection and put it in any one of the 50 amp input output ports. So you would just tie it in like that, turn your smart charger on, and this is going to charge your internal battery. So that's how you have to charge this battery. Or of course you could always take the lid off and just use the alligator clips and put them directly on top of your battery. But if you don't want to have to take this lid off every time, this is the only way to actually charge the battery inside, is by using an Anderson input. So it's really not that big a deal. I think this Anderson connector was around $10 for 4 of them. Got them off Amazon. If you're interested, I'll leave a link down below. But they're really easy to install, and I kind of like them. So that's how you charge this box with an AC current. Now, I see this being used if I had a shed in my backyard and I have a bunch of batteries that I need to charge for like my DeWalt's or my Ryobi tools. I can actually see this being used in the shed. You hook up all of your chargers, your tool chargers, to this thing, to your AC output, then connect a little 100-watt solar panel. Plug it into here, let this thing sit in the shed, keep your batteries for your tools topped off. I think that's a great use for it. I mean, there's 1,000,001 uses to use these little batteries, but that's the first thing that came to my mind is, you know, use the sun to charge up your tool batteries, your little 18-volt batteries. But again, I just think it's a pretty cool little unit, and I think there's a ton of uses for it. There are some things that I wish, you know, were a little bit different, but I'm not going to complain when it's 158 bucks. Like, I wish I could see the DC output in terms of wattage on the screen, and I would love to be able to see solar input wattage. The screen does not show solar input. So that's another reason I prefer, or I'm going to actually use my own MPPT controller, is because the downside to the MPPT in here, don't know the charging parameters, and you can't see the amount of solar energy you're actually putting into the battery from this screen. If you have a Bluetooth battery, you can log into your battery and see how much it's being charged. Or again, if you have your own controller, you can log into it and see the amount of solar energy being put into this battery. But as it sits, you have no way to see the solar input going into your battery. But again, I'm not going to knock it for its price point. It is what it is. It works pretty well. And again, if you have a ton of batteries laying around, I think it's a pretty cool little option. So here is the licitti Xbox. So I think it's pretty cool, and they do make a 2,000 watt version of this too, I believe, on their website. But this is, again, is just a 1,000 watt. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I think it's a pretty cool little gadget, and it's, you know, probably something else I really don't need, but I think it's cool to have. So until next time, folks, see you soon. Take care.